Welcome back. This is episode 3 in the Tiny Room Simulator C Sharp. We are doing this side by side with the bolts. So if you want to see how it's done in Bolt and then see how it's done in C Sharp, you can watch both videos. They will have the same content, just delivered in a different way from a C Sharp to a Bolt uh, understanding. They're both based on C Sharp, so it makes no difference. I would like to have a shout out to one of my students who gave me this awesome microphone that I'm using. It's working really well so far, so thanks so much for that. It's making a difference as we speak. So let's see how far we got in the previous video. I'm able to drop the bed. If I overlap something, I can't drop the bed. But if it goes green, I can drop it. So this is a good sign. This is a good starting point. But notice how if I click the button here, I can just keep spamming the button and adding as many objects as we want. So we don't want to do that. The problem is this button needs to get disabled when we are actually creating as an object, so we can't spam that. It can get very, very painful very quickly. So we're going to try this a little different. So I need to create a tag. So I'm going to select my button, and I created a tag in the previous video. So I'll show you how I created. Tags are very similar to layers. Layers work with physics. So if you have physics like raycasting, you need to work with layers. And if you're working with collisions and physics and stuff, layers are your better option. Whereas if you just want anything that doesn't have any kind of physics or raycasting or colliders, you can just use a tag in order to find something. So the way I created this tag is I want to add tag. I click the add button, whatever you want to give the name, and you add it, and that is how I created a tag. Once I was done with it, I grabbed the button, went to where it says untagged, and I assigned the object button to the tag to the button. So any button that has this tag will get picked up by the script and will be able to do something. So we'll start with the manager and we'll move from there. So we're going to talk about lists, something we haven't done before. So we're going to open up the Tiny Room Manager script. Hopefully my script doesn't crap out and give me shit. So I've been having a few Visual Studio Code issues, like over here where it says couldn't activate debugger extension. So I think it should still be fine regardless. Hopefully, there we go. It's done to compile. Already getting some really interesting errors from game objects, input. This is beautiful. So let me just close it up and close it and open it up again. If you're having any weird, the thing is Unity and Visual Studio don't seem to speak to each other. So go to Window, go to Package Manager, let this load. It'll show you the currently installed packages on your program. Sorry, I'm on LTE, so this internet is damn slow. So bear with me on how long it takes to load these packages. If you're on a first world internet connection, this shouldn't be a problem, and you should already have opened it up. So this is the opposite. You can't pause your life and wait for mine to load and then you can go on. So Visual Studio Code Editor. Currently the 1.1.4 version doesn't really work very well. So click on that, expand it, say see all versions, and we want to go back to around 1.1.2. Select it, and it's going to ask me to update as soon as it catches a wake up. This will fix any weird errors that you have. It should. Visual Studio Code has been acting up a little bit, so if it continues, I'll just open it up in Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio. So let's just update to 1.1.2. This is small. These updates normally don't take long. It's just really some settings just to make working with Visual Studio Code in the editor a lot easier until now, where there's just some weird stuff that happens. Once you see this, it is done. So let's try and open up this Tiny Room Manager script one more time. Hopefully we get no errors or bugs or issues. Hopefully. Okay, so it looks like we're issue free at this point. So what we want to do is we want to create a list. I'm going to make it public for the time being so you can see it in the editor. So just at the bottom here, I'm going to type in public. We're going to type in list, just like that, uppercase L. If you have auto, like IntelliSense, it'll autocomplete for it. So less than, we're going to type in button. Now the problem is you're going to get an error here. The reason for that is that button needs to have a namespace at the top here. So type in using Unity Engine.ui. It needs to use that so it knows what to do with this button situation. So once you've created the list, you need to give it a name. We're just going to call this button list is equal to, and this is where you actually create the list. You're going to go new list. If you've done it right, it should autocomplete for you. 2 round brackets at the end and a semicolon. So this is the list. We've now created the list variable at the top here. So we told it the variable is called button list. It is a list of buttons. Over here we say now create that list based on this name. So that's all we're doing there. Okay, so we're going to do it like we did in Bolt. We're going to go and create a start function here. And in the start, we're going to find all the objects. Now, it's not as simple as Bolt, so we're going to have to do because you could say game object dot find objects of tag. So look for objects of tag there, and you could just try to tell it that this list, we could say button list is equal to, and you won't be able to do that because we can actually try. Maybe we can. You never know. Now, I actually forgot what the name of my buttons were called, so let's go back to Unity. Go here. It's called object buttons, lowercase o, uppercase b. So we're going to type in here object buttons, like that. Now, if you hover over this, it's going to give you an error because you can't return. You're going to return multiple values, and you can't just add it to a list like that. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to cut this out. And this is where we have to do a for each. Select the second option if you're using IntelliSense. And we're going to just paste that in the second half. So we're going to say for every, let's call this object. Keep it nice and simple. So we're just calling them. So for every object you find, actually just call this button. There we go. We know what we're looking for. So for every button we find tagged as object buttons, we're going to go and add that to the list. So we're going to go button list.add, and we're going to go around brackets, and we're going to add the variable called button, like that. Why are you giving me crap? Okay, so if it's going to continue giving us crap, so we're going to say dot button. We're going to get the object dot. Actually, technically that should work. Let me just double check why it's giving me grief. Let's see if this has been typed correctly. It has been typed correctly. So it is a list of buttons. So, oh, okay, sorry. My apologies. Because it's still a game object, you need to go to get component, search for button, 2 round brackets. So that should resolve. So it's actually finding the game object, but it's assigning that to button. So button needs to get the component button because we want to reference the component. So now that we've started, we add all these objects to the list. Let's see how that works out. See if that is working the way we see it. So if we look over here, there's our new, let's go to the correct object. We now have our list. Its currently size is empty. So if we push play, notice how it's added that one button to the list. If we turn it off, it removes it. It's a dynamic list. We're updating this list at runtime. So when the game starts. So now that we have this, we can actually do things with this. So when we go over here, so input dot get mouse button down and is placing, we want to say is placing is false, and we want to set the currently get component when object is dropped. So we are essentially dropping the object over here. So what we want to do when we actually click on the button, over here in the drop, it's simple enough. We're going to drop and we're going to type in for each, because remember we have to do a for each object in the button list. Let's just call this button again, because remember these are throwaway variables, so even though it says button here and it says button there, it makes no difference. They don't see each other. So we need to go button dot interactable is equal to true, because we're dropping it now. So we want to be able to say, when I click the button to drop the object, go through every button in this list and set it to be true. Okay, so that's simple enough. That's done. So now we We need to go to the button side and deactivate all buttons in this list. Remember, we've made this script accessible from other scripts, and now that we made this variable public, we can access this from the button UI script. So on button click, we want to go there. At the end, we're going to do a for each again. And this time it's going to be interesting. Over here where it says collection, we're going to type in tiny room manager dot instance dot underscore, I think it was called button list. So every object in the button list, so we can type this to be buttons again, just so we know what we're talking about. So for every button that's in the manager, we're going to type in button dot interactable is equal to false. So we want to disable that. So let's see if this currently as it stands works. So just so you understand, when we click the button, we're taking all the buttons that are in the list that we created in the manager, yeah, and we're disabling them. But when we drop the object in the list, yeah, so when we press the left mouse button and we drop the object, so if is placing is true and overlapping is false, we're going to go through the list and re-enable all those buttons. So we're going to go back to Unity, select the object. The moment I click this button, it should get disabled, which it has, so I can't spam it. The moment I drop the object, the button is reactivated. Okay, so phase 2, so that's good. Now we can't spam that button anymore, so that button, and all buttons with that tag will get deactivated. So again, if I were to take this button and duplicate it like 4 more times, let's just quickly reposition these so you can see that there are 4 different buttons. Over here, there we go. It doesn't have to be pretty. I'm going to delete them. When I click any of these buttons, because they're all going to do the same functionality, notice how they all get grayed out. When I drop it, notice how they all get activated. And when I go to my tiny room manager, notice how originally we had 1 button, we now have 4 buttons in this list. Okay, so that's it. So let's delete these buttons before I start creating rubbish in my scene. So now that this is working, what we need to do next is when I click the bed button, I want to, at any point while I'm placing the object, I want to be able to middle mouse click and remove the object, delete the object. So that if I've changed my mind, I want to be able to delete the object. So we're going to go back to our tiny room manager, and inside of the update we're going to do actually it makes no difference, we can just do it here. So if we're going to go and we're going to check to see, essentially we're going to actually copy all of that. We're going to copy this is get mouse button, so we're going to copy that, create a new if statement, choose the second one from the top, double click on where it says true and paste this, and this time we need the number to be 2. Remember, 0 is left mouse button, 1 is right mouse button, and 2 is middle mouse button. So if this is the case and this is true, I want to just delete the object. Remember, we have a reference to the currently selected object. So we're going to grab the currently selected object, dot, just, what am I saying? What am I doing? My brain today. So I'm going to go and say game object dot destroy, 2 round brackets, then paste with the object I want to destroy inside of the brackets. So this is now going to destroy the object, but at the same time I want to go and set all of these buttons to be true again. So again, lazy coding. Actually, let's just do it in code. I'm going to copy that, and at the bottom here, it doesn't have to be in the update, it can be outside of the update. So outside the update, let's just call this void. Let's call this enable UI buttons, 2 round brackets, 2 curly braces, and let's just paste this code in here. So this is gonna, and then all we do is just copy this, remove this for each here, and just call that function instead. So whenever enable UI buttons gets called, it's going to come down here and it's going to enable it. And I'm just going to create another one that's going to do the opposite. So let's go paste here. This one is, we can just say disable UI buttons, and this time this one's going to be set to false. There we go. So we have one that enables and disables. So again, all we need to do is copy this, and when this happens, we destroy the object and we re-enable the UI buttons. Let's try that out. If at any point it gets a little too fast, just pause the video, go through it, see if it makes any logical sense what I'm saying. So I'm going to click the bed button. Any point while I'm in the middle here, I can just click the middle mouse button and I remove the object. I can do it again. Middle mouse button removes it. But the problem is once I place it, I no longer have access to this object. I can't move it. I can't delete it. The only way to do this would be to start the game all over again. We don't want to do that. Once I've dropped an object, I want to be able to right click on that object to reselect that object. So I can move it around again, rotate it, that sort of thing. And we're going to do this again in our Tiny Room Manager. And we're going to do it at the top here. So when we right click, so we're going to do all this code over here. So we're going to go if and we're going to copy is placing. If is placing is false. So if I right click and I'm already got an object selected, that already suggests that I'm placing an object, so I don't need to worry about that. So I'm saying if placing is false, and now we're going to do the raycast. We're going to go physics. I'm so glad this is updating. Great. Raycast, and we're going to just copy all of this logic up here, camera.main.screenPointToRay. We're going to copy all of this again, with the exception of the last one. We're going to replace we're going to essentially replace that layer. So I'm going to copy that. And one more thing we need to check is right at the end, and input dot get mouse button down. Which one do we want to get down? 2. No, 1. It's the right mouse button. My apologies. So we're checking to see if we get the right. We're getting some. Oh, there's only one and instead of a 7. That's beautiful work right there. Okay, so now we're saying if placing is not. So we're doing the opposite of this essentially. We probably could just. Let's pop this directly underneath the other right mouse button option. Yeah, that seems right. So if this is true, what we want to do is take the currently selected object. So I spoke about the layer here. So we could do a check to see what layer we're hitting, but just for cleanliness sake, I'm going to create a new serialized field, a new layer mask, call this one OBJ layer, so that's going to be my object layer. I'm going to copy that one and paste that into the second raycast. So if we hit the object and the right mouse button was down and placing was false, which means we can place the object, we're going to say current selected object is equal to the hit variable, so hit dot collider dot game object. Now we're getting the objects. Remember, raycasts get colliders, they don't get actual game objects. So we're saying find the collider and find the game object that is attached to that collider. Okay, so all that's left is type in placing. So is placing, which is down here, is equal to true, because now we're placing an object again. So we're now redoing everything. Okay, so let's again check if that works. Let me just put some spacing here between my if statements so it doesn't look like they're all on top of each other. Same thing with these two functions. There we go. Control Alt F is to format, or just right click and say format document. Okay, so let's see what happens now. This should work. Emphasis on should. Okay, so I'm going to click the bed. I can drop it. When I right click, I can't pick it up because, like a dumbass, I have not created the layer. So I'm going to select these two objects. And I've already set up the layer from the previous Bolt project. So all I did was this was set to default. I went and created a new layer. I called it objects, and then I assigned this layer to the base, the prefab. So I selected objects, and it's asking me, do I want to assign to all the children? In the case of this, I know the children don't have any colliders, so it makes no difference. So I said no, just do it to this object only. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to select my script, and in the object layer, I'm going to select objects because that's what I want to raycast for when it's in the object. I'm going to place the object in the scene, right click, we'll pick it up. Notice how the overlap is doing some interesting stuff, and then when I click it down, I can drop it again. Right click, I can pick it up. Right click, hold down right click will allow me to rotate, and then I can drop it down. So almost all the functionality is in place. It's just the overlap works in a really weird way, and we're not disabling or enabling the correct stuff here. So we just need to make sure that we are feeding this correctly. So now that all of this works, we just need to go to our script for our prefab base. And remember, we have an on-trigger stay, on-trigger exit, and when object is dropped, we set the not overlaid mesh to be false and the original to be true. So what we need to do is when we right click to pick up the object, we just want to go and invert that selection. So we want to go here. Let's copy this and call this when object is picked up. Let's just call it. We're going with all this weird naming, we might as well just roll with it. And the not overlapped one needs to be true because we want the green one to show up again, and the original one needs to be false. Apologies for the dogs, my neighborhood. They just heard a Mr. Delivery guy and they're going balls to the wall. Okay, so when object is picked up, so we want to call that function again. How do we call this function? We're going to call this from the manager. So we're going to say when we right click, let's just hold on for a little bit, these dogs are going crazy. So over here where we're checking if we're placing the object, we can go after this line, we're going to say currently selected object dot get component, and it's called prefab base, 2 round braces, full stop, add that function I just created in the actual base, and we'll call that. So when we right click, we're going to pick it up, and in the prefab we're just going to switch out, turn off the original mesh, turn on the green mesh, and that should do the trick. So let's do this. Let's select the object, we can still delete it, select the object, let's drop it into the world, right click, notice how it went green again. When I overlap a wall, it's red, I can no longer place it. When I come back out, I can drop it anywhere I want. Over here, I can right click to pick it up again, hold down right click to rotate, and I can drop it again. So all the functionality is there. We can drop an object, we can select an object from a menu, we can pick up an object, move it around, rotate it, and delete it. So even if as we saw this, we can delete the object while we have it selected, or we can drop the object, right click to pick it up, and delete the object again. So let's talk about the logic that we have so far. We have 3 scripts as it stands. We have one on the button. It simply has a function called when we click the button, we're going to instantiate this object that we need to spawn, which is right here. So whenever you want to do it, either make a prefab of this button or duplicate the button in the scene and just change up the model that you want to instantiate. Next one is the actual code on the prefab over here, which has, if we open up the prefab, you'll see that it has 3 models. I kept it very basic. One is the original model, one is the overlap model, which is red, and then the other one is green for when the model is free and clear to be dropped. So the script has 3 slots, one for the original model, one for the overlap model, and one for the not overlap model. And based on whether it's on trigger stay, on trigger exit, or when you click, it will turn these meshes on and off. That is how we're doing that. What's great about this setup, it's easy to understand and follow, and then you can easily just change up the materials that you're using. So that's it for this video. So the next video we're going to cover a little more about UI, start doing custom functions for different objects, like turning lights on and off, and setting up a TV that maybe plays a video in the background, that sort of thing. So again, just to recap what we've done in this video, we started out being able to place the object, rotate it, and drop it. The functionality we've added now is when we select an object, notice how this button did not get grayed out. I want to disable that when I right click. Just remind me to do that. So I'm able to pick up the object, rotate it again, and then again drop it down. If I right click to pick it up, I can middle mouse click to delete it. So I just want to go and quickly fix that issue. So we're going to go to our manager script. I assume that's where this is happening. So when we input.getMouse button, we're looking for 2. So over here, we shouldn't be using enable. We should actually be using disable UI buttons as opposed to enable UI buttons, because we actually want to turn them off, not turn them on when we right click. So let's see if that sorts out that issue. So that now we're going to test to see if I drop the object and I pick it up, it did not disable the UI buttons. Why are you being full of crap? Let's see. Is placing is true and oh, that's the wrong place. My apologies. So that was right. We're just going to copy this to when we actually pick up the object. So if placing is that, we're going to set that, set all of that, and then right at the end here we are going to disable the UI, put a semicolon at the end, and now that should fix it. So I really like doing a little bit of kind of off the seat of my pants kind of coding, just to show you that. Notice how when I select it, it's grayed out. When I drop it, it gets enabled. Select it, delete it, create a new button, select the object, rotate the object. So now all of the functionality is here for us to build on top. Thank you for watching this video, and keep your eyes out. We should have another video in the next week or so. Thank you so much for the support, and enjoy the rest of your week.